I'm going to share a few stories with you, one by one, though, because if I was overwhelmed by them, I have a feeling you kids will be too. I'm Officer Bradley. I retired from the force 10 years ago at the ripe age of 50. I'll begin with a story from my 20 years as a police officer that has stuck with me like a deep thorn. January 17th, 2005. We got a call about a woman who had locked herself in her bathroom. She said her boyfriend was trying to kill her. My partner Mason and I arrive at a house at the end of a street. The lamppost flickered yellow and the wind danced through the trees and bushes. The clouds were thick and the air was ice cold. We took position at the front door. We knocked. Police, open up. Only the sound of wind chimes. Mason kicked the door open with all the force he could muster. We scanned the house downstairs. No one in sight clear. You hear that? I said. Mason looked up at the stairs. Gentle cries, a woman, so subtle as if muffled behind a door in a room. Thought she was supposed to be downstairs, said Mason. We made our way upstairs. Ma'am, it's okay, I began. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you. The crying stopped abruptly as if someone had hit pause. Then it started again. But he's still here, replied the woman from inside the bedroom. My partner and I checked the entire house. No one's here, ma'am. You're safe. Downstairs, the front door slammed shut. My partner and I exchanged a glance. I noticed his brow sweating despite the cold night. I gestured with my head for him to take a look. He stood at the top of the stairs and looked down at the front door. Just the wind, I think, he said. Then a gentle voice came from inside the bathroom. Are you sure, Officer Bradley? The woman asked. The entire night at that scene, neither my partner Mason nor I had used our names out loud. Not once. Ma'am, do you need help or not? Mason was agitated. We need to know you're okay, so step back because I'm kicking it in. Part of me believes Mason was more eager to see the woman's face, to find out who she was and how she knew what she did, than he was for her safety. He wanted peace of mind. No, hold on, I said. She might be sitting right by the door. We don't want to hurt her. Then she said it. Officer Bradley, tell Mason that if he touches this door, I will visit his family in the late hours of a certain night and break down a door of my own. The woman's voice was an octave deeper when she said that. I had never understood the expression white as a ghost. Do people actually turn that pale in the face? I learned that they do when I saw my partner react to those sinister words. I couldn't stop him from kicking in that bedroom door this time. But when he did, we found nobody inside. There wasn't a window above the shower through which to escape or another door to go through. And yet, we were certain that we had just had a full conversation with a woman behind this door. We scanned the entire house, including the backyard. One last time, inch by inch, nothing. My partner and I communicated non-verbally for the rest of the night. So when it was time to leave, we gave each other a look and left the house without even glancing back. Now, this is the part of the story I haven't told anyone, not even Mason. We were sufficiently disturbed, so I didn't want to tell him what I'm about to tell you. When we left the house, I drove us back to the station that night. He probably thought I didn't notice, but his hands were shaking too much to drive comfortably. He doesn't drink coffee. As I reversed the cruiser out of the street, Mason didn't look back at the house. But the truth is, I did, and I sincerely wish that I hadn't. I looked and squinted at a garbage can by the side of the house to see a strange, dark figure kneeling by the gate as if watching us leave. And as we finally drove away, as the house became more and more distant in our mirror, the figure slowly stood up. And I'll swear, even today, that as it stood up, it didn't stop rising until its head peeked over the roof of that 2-story house. My name is Officer David Carter. I've been on the force for 12 years and I've seen a lot, but the call we got that night is one I'll never forget. It was past midnight when the dispatch came through. My partner and I were on patrol when we heard the radio crackle. Silent 911 call from 3205 Willow Lane. Line is open, but the caller isn't speaking. When we pulled up to the old stone house, a man answered the door. He looked calm to calm, but there was something in his eyes. A flicker of unease. Officers, good evening. Is there a problem? We received a 911 call from this address. Is there anyone else in the house? I asked. The man furrowed his brows. Oh, must have been a pocket dial. My phone was in my hand, must have hit the button by accident. Sorry about that. Everything's fine here, but my instincts told me otherwise. I scanned the yard, my eyes drifting up to the second floor. A small window was cracked open, and then I saw it, a tiny hand waving frantically. I nudged my partner. We need to check inside. The man took a step back. Look, this is really just a misunderstanding, please. We drew our weapons. Step back and get on the ground, I ordered. He turned to run, but we tackled him, pinning him to the ground before securing him in cuffs. My partner rushed inside. The house was eerily silent. Dark stains dotted the floor. We bolted up the stairs and stopped in front of a locked door. Police, open the door. No answer, then a muffled sob. We kicked the door in. What we saw made my blood run cold. A woman sat huddled in the corner. Her face was bruised, her wrists bound. Worst of all, her lips had been sealed shut with glue. She couldn't make a sound. The only thing she could do was reach out. I knelt beside her and quickly freed her wrists. She trembled violently as my partner radioed for an ambulance. Her breathing was ragged, her eyes full of unshed tears. For a few moments, she just stared at me, her chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. Then, without warning, she threw herself into my arms, clutching onto me as if I was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. She didn't need to say a word. Her relief, her gratitude, her desperation, all of it was in that one embrace. The woman was taken to the hospital immediately. The suspect was arrested on charges of kidnapping, assault, and aggravated battery. Later that night, I spoke with Jessica, the 911 operator who had stayed on the line. We all knew how close this had been. If we hadn't noticed that hand waving from the window, this story could have ended very differently. Sometimes the smallest action can save a life. At night, a single desperate hand in the dark made all the difference. It was November 2005, a year I'll never forget. That winter in White Pines was unlike any other. The town was gripped by fear, neighbors whispering anxiously, locking their doors tight. Something was out there, something we couldn't explain. That night, the snow and fog were so thick you could barely see a foot ahead. My phone rang just past midnight. It was Henry Morrison. His voice trembled. "Sheriff, someone knocked on my door, ... But when I opened it, no one was there. But ... but there are footprints." I took a deep breath. White Pines was a small town where everybody knew each other. We weren't used to things like this. I grabbed my radio. "Jake, get ready. We've got a call." Stepping outside, the freezing wind cut straight to the bone. We climbed into the cruiser and drove to Henry's house. He was waiting at the door, shaking. "Come quick, look." I shined my flashlight down and my stomach tightened. There were footprints in the snow, bare footprints. But the strangest part, they led toward the woods, and then just stopped, as if whoever left them had vanished into thin air. Some tracks went deeper, almost like something had pulled them in. Jake frowned. "That's impossible. Someone walked out here barefoot, and then what? Flew away." Henry backed inside, his eyes darting around. When I opened the door, I felt something, like I was being watched. But there was nothing there. A chill crawled up my spine. "Did you notice anything else?" He hesitated. I'm not sure. The shadows, they seemed to move. But maybe it was just my imagination. The next morning, other townsfolk reported the same thing. Footsteps in the snow. Some had their doors knocked on. Others found prints leading right up to their porches. But no one had stepped outside. Days passed. The footprints kept appearing, always ending abruptly. The town was on edge. I was starting to wonder if there was any logical explanation at all. Then an old woman, Mary Thompson, gave us a lead. "My neighbor David sleepwalks," she said. "Has for years. He lives a few miles from here. Maybe there's a connection." We drove out to David's place. The old man answered the door, looking exhausted. "David, have you noticed where you've been waking up lately?" He rubbed his temples. "Sometimes in my bed, sometimes in the kitchen, but sometimes outside. Don't know how I get there." When we realized David was a sleepwalker, the town let out a collective sigh of relief. But something still nagged at me, because there was one problem we couldn't explain on the nights David had wandered. The footprints always had a beginning and an end. But some nights, the knocking still happened and the tracks still vanished. A week later, Henry called again. His voice shook even worse this time. "Sheriff, it happened again. Someone knocked, and when I opened the door, no one was there. I remember the pen slipping from my fingers. I immediately called David. David, where have you been this past week?" "Sheriff, I haven't been in town for days." I stared out the window at the snow-covered street, phone still in my hand. If David wasn't here, then whose footprints were those? For a while, I thought maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. We increased patrols, and eventually the incident stopped. Years passed, and I moved on from White Pines. But then, not long ago, an old colleague called me up. "You remember those footprints? The ones that disappeared?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, why?" He sighed. "It's happening again." And just like that, that old